She saved a man's life, but didn't know he was the father of a millionaire. And what happened next? Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. And when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The shouting erupted before Lena even realized something was wrong. A sharp, desperate cry that sliced through the evening air and made her freeze in place. She had just stepped out of the grocery store carrying a small paper bag of discounted supplies. Her long shift at the clinic had left her exhausted, but the sound jolted her heart back to full alertness. "Sir, please, hold on," a trembling voice echoed from across the quiet parking area. Lena turned her head and saw an elderly man collapse beside a parked black sedan, one hand clutching his chest, the other scraping helplessly against the asphalt as he tried to breathe. Without hesitation, without a single thought about herself, Lena dropped her bag and ran. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked as she knelt beside him. Her voice calm despite the adrenaline rushing under her skin. His eyes were wide with fear, his breath shallow and rapid. I can't," he gasped. "You're okay. I'm right here," she whispered, positioning him carefully, checking his pulse, feeling it skip in dangerous, irregular bursts. A crowd began to gather, phones out, voices anxious, but no one stepping forward. "Call an ambulance," Lena ordered without looking up. "Now, please." Someone mumbled a response. Someone else backed away. The old man squeezed her wrist weakly. "Don't let me go," he whispered. "I won't," Lena said, leaning closer so he could hear her steady tone. "You're not alone. Stay with me. Just stay with me." His breathing hitched. His fingers trembled. She knew the signs. She knew the risk. She knew that every second mattered. And she also knew the ambulance wouldn't arrive in time. She took a deep breath, looked straight into his frightened eyes, and said softly, "I need to help you now. Right here. Don't be afraid." He blinked, as if trusting her by instinct alone. With swift practiced motions she began the emergency technique she had used only 3 times in her career. All successful, all terrifying. The crowd gasped as she worked, stabilizing him, guiding his breaths, grounding him through the crisis with her voice and her strength. "You're doing great," she whispered. "Stay with me. Stay right here." After what felt like an eternity, the flashing lights of the ambulance finally cut through the tension. Medics rushed over, asking rapid questions, but the old man didn't look at them. He kept looking at her, right at her, as if memorizing her face. "Thank you," he breathed as they lifted him onto the stretcher. "Don't disappear." Lena offered a reassuring smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, unaware of how profoundly untrue those words would soon become, because at that exact moment, standing at a distance, watching with stunned disbelief, was Adrian Hale, millionaire CEO, visionary entrepreneur, and the son of the man she had just saved. Unseen, unheard, frozen in place, and completely unprepared for the fact that the girl kneeling beside his father would soon change everything in his carefully controlled world. Everything. Adrian Hale was not supposed to be there that evening, not in that quiet parking lot, not among startled strangers and flashing ambulance lights. His schedule had been planned down to the minute. Meetings, calls, dinners he didn't really want to attend but did anyway because people expected it, because that was the life he had built for himself. But something had made him take a detour on his way home, a faint instinct he could not explain. And now he stood frozen, watching the medics wheel his father away, and watching her, the young woman who had been kneeling on the ground, her hands still trembling slightly from the effort of keeping a stranger alive. Lena. He didn't know her name yet, but he would soon. He felt the world tilt very slightly, as if someone had reached into the clockwork of his life and shifted one crucial gear. The medics loaded his father into the ambulance, one of them calling out details Adrian didn't fully process. Everything sounded muffled, distant, drowned by shock. His father, the man who walked 5 miles every morning, who insisted on doing his own grocery shopping, who refused chauffeurs because wheels pamper the bones, collapsed, right here. And this girl, this stranger, was the one who had stepped in when no one else did. When people around had hesitated, frozen, or grabbed their phones instead of a hand. Adrian swallowed hard, his jaw tense, his breath shallow. The ambulance doors slammed shut, the sirens flared to life. He snapped out of his shock and rushed toward the vehicle. But before he reached it, he stopped abruptly, because the girl turned around. And for the first time, he saw her face clearly. Her eyes were gentle but tired, deeply tired, the kind of tiredness he recognized but hadn't admitted in himself. Her hands, steady just moments ago, were now shaking a little, the leftover adrenaline revealing how much control she had needed to keep. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn, her hair tied in a loose knot that had half unraveled during the emergency. She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't posing, she wasn't looking for applause. She looked like someone who had done this countless times and never expected anything in return. He stared at her, unable to speak, unable to move, but Lena didn't see him. She was bending down to gather the groceries she had dropped earlier, picking up bruised apples, a torn bag of rice, a packet of tea that had burst open and spilled across the pavement. Her hands moved quietly, carefully, as if even this small devastation mattered. A man approached her hesitantly. "Miss, that was incredible," he said, in his voice. Lena gave a small shy smile. "It's just what anyone would do," she murmured. But Adrian saw the crowd, saw the eyes around her. He saw the guilt on their faces, the shame, because they knew she was wrong. Not everyone would do what she did. Not everyone did. People had watched, recorded, whispered, but she alone had acted. She tucked the torn tea packet into her bag and then straightened slowly, her legs stiff from kneeling on the cold ground for so long. The ambulance pulled away, and the world around them seemed to exhale, slowly, reluctantly, as if releasing the moment only because time demanded it. Lena turned to leave, and that jolted Adrian into action. He stepped forward, his voice breaking through the fading noise. "Wait." She paused, looked over her shoulder, not startled, but cautious, as if she had learned to expect very little from strangers. Adrian approached her, every step heavy with urgency he didn't quite understand. He began, but the words tangled in his throat. How did one thank someone for saving a life? For saving his father's life? Lena tilted her head slightly, her expression soft yet unreadable. "Are you all right?" she asked him gently. "You look pale." He almost laughed, because she had just saved a man from a near-fatal collapse, and here she was worrying about him. I'm fine," he said slowly. "Actually, the man you helped, he's my father." Lena's eyes widened. Just a little, not in shock but in quiet realization. "Oh," she breathed. "Is he going to be okay?" "We're heading to the hospital now," Adrian said, his voice thick despite his efforts to control it. "Thank you. For what you did. For staying with him. For not giving up." Lena shook her head softly. "No need to thank me. Anyone with training would have done the same. But they didn't," Adrian replied, harsher than he intended. "You did. Only you." She looked down at the pavement, at the groceries in her hands. "I just didn't want him to be alone," she said quietly. "No one should face something like that alone." Adrian's throat tightened, because she spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who knew loneliness too well. He wanted to say more, to ask her name, to offer her a ride to the hospital, to do something that matched the magnitude of what she had just done. But she lifted her bag, holding it with both hands as if reminding herself she had another life to return to. "I'm glad he has someone waiting for him," she said with a gentle, almost fragile smile. "That's what matters most." With that, she turned to go, and Adrian felt something in him panic, something primal, something that didn't want her to disappear into the evening like a passing miracle. "Please," he said under his breath, "don't go yet." But Lena was already walking away, her figure small against the vastness of the parking lot, each step a quiet retreat back into a world she never bragged about, never demanded recognition for. Adrian watched her disappear around the corner, a stranger, a guardian, a woman who had saved his father, and he felt deep in his chest, in a place he rarely acknowledged, that this moment was just the beginning. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He didn't know why her eyes carried sadness behind their warmth. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had to find her again, not because she saved his father, but because, for a reason he couldn't yet explain, she had just saved him too. The hospital corridor buzzed with a low hum of footsteps and muffled voices, the kind of steady noise that filled the space between fear and hope. Adrian paced back and forth near the double doors of the cardiac unit, his suit jacket hanging open, his tie loose, his hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it countless times. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound made him turn sharply, expecting news, bracing for it. He had been through negotiations that involved billions, had navigated crises that threatened entire branches of his company, had stood in boardrooms where men twice his age tried to corner him, but nothing, absolutely nothing, felt as terrifying as waiting to hear whether his father would wake up. He stopped pacing and sat down for a moment. elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together, staring at the floor with dazed eyes. The memory replayed in his mind again and again, his father collapsing, the strangers stepping back, and then her, the girl with the steady hands and trembling breath, kneeling beside a man she didn't know, fighting for him as if he were her own family, using nothing but knowledge, instinct, and a heart that didn't know fear. He closed his eyes, recalling the soft determination in her voice, the way she spoke to his father with gentleness and authority all at once. Who was she? Where did she learn to do that? What drove her to rush toward danger when everyone else froze? A door clicked open behind him. He jumped to his feet instantly. A doctor approached, reading something from a chart, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Hale," he said. Adrian's breath caught somewhere high in his chest. "Your father is stable for now," the doctor continued. "He experienced an acute cardiac episode, but the intervention he received on site was crucial. Whoever helped him probably saved his life." Adrian felt something inside him crumble, relief so overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. "Can I see him?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes, but he's still weak," the doctor said gently. "He's asking for you." Those words hit him harder than he expected. His father, asking for him. He nodded quickly and followed the doctor through the doors. The room was quiet, dimly lit, machines softly beeping in steady rhythms. His father lay in the hospital bed, pale, smaller somehow, as if the weight of the years had settled on him all at once. But when he opened his eyes and saw Adrian, they sparkled with recognition. "Son," he whispered. Adrian swallowed hard and moved to his bedside, taking the frail hand that had once guided him through life's storms. "You scared me," Adrian murmured, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. "You scared me more than anything ever has." His father gave him a tired smile. "I wasn't alone," he whispered. "She stayed, that young woman. She held my hand. She wouldn't let me fade." Adrian nodded slowly. "I saw her," he said quietly. "I was there. She was remarkable." A silence fell between them, deep, layered, filled with unspoken gratitude. "She told me," his father continued, "that she believes no one should face something like that alone." Such a simple thing to say, but so true. Adrian lowered his eyes, thinking about how often he had faced everything alone. By choice, by pride, by habit. "What was her name?" his father asked. Adrian hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. His father looked surprised. "You didn't ask." I froze," Adrian confessed. "I thanked her, but something in me couldn't speak properly. And then she left." His father closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. "Then find her," he whispered. "A heart like that is rare, and I'd like to thank her myself, properly." Adrian nodded, his jaw tightening with renewed determination. "I will," he said softly. "I promise." His father squeezed his hand weakly. "Son, sometimes life places people in our path for a reason," he whispered. "Don't let this one slip away." Adrian looked at the frail arm, at the hand that had built a family from nothing, that had taught him strength, that had now almost slipped from his grasp forever. And he knew his father was right. He had to find her, not out of obligation, not because she saved a life, but because something in her presence had stirred a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of humanity he had almost forgotten, a warmth he hadn't allowed himself to feel, a reminder that behind his empire, behind his power, behind his carefully maintained image, he was still capable of being moved, deeply, unexpectedly, irrevocably. Adrian didn't leave the hospital until late, after his father fell asleep, after the doctors assured him again and again that the worst had passed. When he finally stepped outside, the night air felt different, sharper, clearer, as if cleansing something within him. He took out his phone, dialed his assistant, and said in a low, decisive voice, "I need help finding someone." A pause followed. Then the assistant asked politely, "Of course, who exactly?" Adrian hesitated, searching for words to describe her, but all he could say was, "A girl, a young woman. She saved my father." Another pause, longer this time. "Do you have a name? A picture? Any identifying details?" Adrian closed his eyes, recalling her face, her voice, her trembling hands. "No," he whispered, "but start with the security cameras in the parking lot. Look for a girl who ran toward my father when everyone else ran away." He ended the call and looked up at the night sky, stretching endlessly above him. For the first time in a long time, he felt something shift inside him, something awakening, something reaching toward a horizon he had never dared to explore. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story, but he would find her, whatever it took, because he had the strange, uncheckable feeling that this unknown quiet girl was about to change his entire life. Not someday, not gradually, but now. Already. Morning came slowly, spreading pale golden light across the city like a hesitant promise. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. Buses crowded, shops opened, coffee cups steamed in cold hands. But for Lena, the morning felt heavier than usual, as though the world carried a lingering echo of what happened the night before. She had slept only a few hours, drifting in and out of uneasy dreams, hearing fragments of the old man's strained breathing, feeling again the weight of his trembling hand gripping hers. Even now, as she stood in her tiny kitchen preparing a simple breakfast tea and a single slice of bread, her mind replayed the moment he whispered those soft words. "Don't let me go." Lena shook her head gently, trying to clear the memory. She shouldn't get attached. She told herself that every time she helped someone in crisis. But it was impossible not to wonder. Did he survive? Was he alone? Did someone come for him? She didn't know the man's name, didn't know where they took him. She had no right to search for him. No connection except the fragile bridge built in a moment of fear and compassion. With a quiet sigh, she gathered her bag and left her apartment. Her shoes were still damp from the night before, but she didn't have another pair. She would need to manage. The streets buzzed softly as she walked toward the clinic, her workplace, her refuge, her battlefield. A small community medical center always overflowing with people who needed more than the world gave them. On her way, she passed a flower stall run by an elderly woman she knew. "Good morning, child," the florist greeted warmly. "You look tired." Lena smiled faintly. "Just a long night," she murmured. "You're always having long nights." The woman chuckled gently. "One day you will learn to rest. Your body is not made of iron." Lena laughed softly. "I know. I try." She didn't try. Rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her job was part-time. Her debts were large. And her mother, miles away, depended on her support. She continued walking, unaware that across town, at that very same moment, Adrian Hale was in his office with a storm brewing behind his eyes. The office was a towering glass structure overlooking the beating heart of the city. Inside, everything was immaculate, precise, expensive, but Adrian didn't see any of it. He sat at the head of a long, polished conference table, his fingers drumming impatiently, his gaze fixed on the large monitor displaying the paused frame from the parking lot security footage. There she was, captured mid-motion, leaning over his father, her hair falling forward, her hands placed firmly on his chest as she stabilized him. His assistant, Ethan, stood near the monitor holding a tablet. "We managed to pull footage from multiple angles," Ethan explained carefully, "and I've already sent the stills to our private investigator, but we might be able to identify her ourselves." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "How?" "She dropped a grocery bag," Ethan said, tapping the tablet. One of the receipts fell out. The store's system logged a purchase matching the timestamp. He handed the tablet to Adrian. On it was a digital copy of a receipt. Few cheap items. Bread, apples, tea, a pack of generic medical gloves. "So we know where she shops," Adrian murmured. "We do," Ethan nodded. "I can have someone visit the store. Ask about her. Show her photo." "No." Adrian cut him off sharply, his voice soft but decisive. "No intrusion. No pressure. I don't want to frighten her or turn this into a spectacle." Ethan hesitated, surprised. "So what do you want us to do?" Adrian looked again at the girl's captured face. Even blurred by low-resolution footage, her expression was unforgettable. Calm, focused, brave. He exhaled slowly. "I want to find her respectfully, carefully," he said. "I want to speak to her, not interrogate her, and certainly not overwhelm her." Ethan nodded, understanding the deeper, unspoken message. This wasn't a business operation. This was personal, more personal than anything Adrian had allowed himself to feel in years. "If she works near the store," Ethan reasoned, "we might be able to track her routine without disturbing her." Adrian nodded. "Do that." Discreetly. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with sudden urgency. "I'm going out." Ethan blinked. "To where?" "To the clinic district," Adrian replied, grabbing his coat, his tone leaving no room for questions. "I want to search myself. But sir, with your schedule, cancel everything." "Everything." "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "Everything." Ethan stared in disbelief. In the 5 years he had worked for Adrian Hale, he had never heard such words. Lena arrived at the clinic just before her shift. Patients were already waiting outside. A small crowd formed long before opening hours. As always, She greeted them warmly, unlocking the doors, letting them in one by one, offering a kind smile or a soft word of reassurance. Inside, she slipped into her scrubs, tied her hair back into a neater bun, washed her hands, and began her day. Her colleague, Maria, approached her with a mug of instant coffee. "You look like you didn't sleep at all," Maria observed. "Did something happen?" Lena hesitated. "Someone collapsed in the parking lot last night," she said quietly. "An older man. I helped until the ambulance arrived." Maria's eyes widened. "Lena, not again. You keep getting into these emergencies even outside work." Lena shrugged softly. "I was just there." Maria sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to burn yourself out. One day your body will say no more." "Maybe," Lena murmured, "but not today." They shared a tender moment of silent understanding before Lena stepped into the first exam room. Hours passed. Patients came and went. Children cried. Mothers thanked her. An elderly woman pressed a small knitted bracelet into her hand as a thank you. Lena smiled through her exhaustion, pouring her heart into every interaction. She didn't know that outside, on the opposite side of the street, a black car had just stopped, and Adrian stepped out, not in a suit now, not in polished shoes, but in a simple coat and casual clothes that made him almost unrecognizable. He held a printed still frame from the security footage in his hand, folded carefully inside his pocket. He stood on the sidewalk staring at the clinic's modest entrance, people coming and going, nurses rushing, volunteers unloading supplies. He didn't know she worked here. He didn't know if he would find her, but something instinct, fate, or something deeper told him he was close. He took a slow breath, feeling nervous in a way he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. Then he stepped toward the entrance, each step leading him closer to a girl he didn't yet know but could not forget. A girl who saved his father. A girl who, without realizing it, had just become the center of his world. The hours after Adrian left the clinic felt strangely suspended in time, as if the world around him moved at its usual frantic pace while his thoughts drifted somewhere far slower, far softer. He sat in the back seat of his car, silent, gazing out the window as the city rolled by in blurred shapes and shifting colors. Neon signs flickering, pedestrians weaving between cars, exhaust fumes mixing with the distant scent of street food and pavement. But none of it reached him fully. His mind replayed Lena's voice, her smile, the moment she said her name. Just Lena. He found himself whispering it under his breath, tasting it like a secret, fragile and warm. He didn't understand why she affected him so deeply, why the sight of her felt like a quiet breaking open inside his chest, why gratitude had tangled with something heavier, something quieter, something almost frightening. He leaned his head back, exhaling slowly. His driver, Owen, glanced at him through the rearview mirror but said nothing. Years of working with Adrian had taught him to read silence like a language. This silence was not anger, not frustration, but introspection, a rare state for a man who usually carved through life like a blade. "Home, sir," Owen said softly as they pulled up to the entrance of Adrian's building. Adrian blinked, realizing they had arrived without him noticing. "Thank you," he murmured, stepping out. The doorman greeted him with a warm smile. "Good evening, Mr. Hale," but Adrian barely heard him. He walked through the lobby, rode the elevator to the top floor, and entered his penthouse, an expansive modern space with tall windows overlooking the shimmering city skyline. Normally, the view steadied him, reminded him of what he had built. Tonight, it felt distant, cold, irrelevant. He loosened his tie, set aside his coat, and walked through the silent rooms too big, too empty, too clean. Rooms that looked like success but felt like loneliness. He paused at the kitchen counter, the same counter where he sometimes ate dinner alone, long after midnight. The same place where he kept unopened mail from his father, who often sent handwritten letters Adrian never had the courage to read. He reached for a glass, filled it with water, and sat by the window. His thoughts drifted back to his father. He should return to the hospital later, be at his side, tell him everything was going to be all right. But Adrian knew that wasn't enough. His father needed more than a visit. He needed his son back. Not the CEO, not the public figure, just his son, a role Adrian had abandoned for far too long. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of guilt settling again. Then, just as quickly, another image replaced the guilt. Lena standing in the clinic hallway, her hands gently folded, her eyes tired but kind. Her voice soft as she said, "I'm glad he's all right." Adrian closed his eyes. That feeling again, something loosening, something opening. He didn't want it to stop. Meanwhile, Across town, Lena's shift had finally ended. She walked home under the warm glow of streetlights, her steps slow, her body aching with deep exhaustion. Her mind clouded with thoughts of the unexpected visitor who had come to see her, Adrian Hale. She hadn't expected to see him again. She hadn't expected the intensity in his eyes. She hadn't expected how gentle he seemed despite the quiet power he radiated. It unsettled her in ways she wasn't prepared for. Her life didn't include men like him. Her world was small, humble, built from necessity and work and the constant pressure of survival. People like Adrian lived in another universe, a universe of glass towers, tailored suits, and choices she could only dream of. She reached her apartment door and unlocked it quietly. Inside was a small one-room place with peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture. But it was home, her sanctuary, her corner of the world. She changed out of her scrubs and sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her eyes. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "How are you, sweetheart?" Lena smiled softly and typed a quick reassuring reply, hiding her fatigue as always. Then she lay back on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mind returned, annoyingly, to Adrian. Why had he come in person? Why had he searched for her? Why had his voice trembled ever so slightly when he said her name? She pressed her palm to her forehead and sighed. Stop thinking about him. He came to say thank you. Nothing more. He's a millionaire. He has a whole world waiting for him. You're just... But her thoughts halted abruptly, echoing his words. You're not just you. She swallowed hard, her heart responding in ways she didn't want, ways she didn't understand. She turned on her side, hugging a pillow, trying to sleep. But sleep refused to claim her, because part of her wondered, part of her feared, part of her hoped. Would he come back? The next morning, Adrian returned to the hospital to see his father. Harold Hale looked better. His skin held more color, his eyes clearer, though still tired. They talked softly for some time. Small things at first. Updates, reassurances, memories slipping in between. And then Harold's expression grew thoughtful. Did you find her? Adrian nodded slowly. Yes, I found her. His father's eyes warmed. And Adrian hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She's remarkable, he said softly. Harold smiled at that. I knew it, he whispered. Sometimes you can tell, even in a moment of fear. Adrian sat at the edge of the bed, folding his hands. I want you to meet her. When you're stronger. I would like that very much. Harold murmured. But tell me, son, what do you want? Adrian looked down, unprepared for the question. What did he want? To thank her? Yes. To repay her? Maybe. But deeper than that, there was something else. Something he didn't yet understand. I'm not sure, Adrian admitted quietly. His father studied him for a long moment. You haven't looked unsure in years, Harold said softly. Perhaps it's good for you to feel something unexpected. Adrian let out a breath that almost resembled a laugh. Unexpected is one word for it. Harold chuckled weakly, then grew serious again. Whatever fate is doing, don't run from it. Life rarely hands you people who change your path. Adrian nodded slowly, his father's words sinking deep. As he left the hospital later, walking into the crisp morning air, he didn't go to the office. He didn't check his phone. He didn't think about meetings or deadlines. He found himself turning instinctively in the direction of the clinic. He wasn't sure if she'd be there yet. He wasn't sure what he'd even say. But something fate, courage, or simply an unexplainable pull guided his steps. By the time he reached the street with the clinic, the morning crowds had already begun to gather. He crossed the road slowly, scanning the entrance, and then he saw her, standing outside the clinic, talking softly to an elderly patient, her expression patient and kind, her posture slightly bent forward in concern. The sight hit him with a warmth he wasn't ready for. She looked up, just for a second, and her gaze collided with his. Her lips parted slightly, surprise rippling across her face. Adrian took a slow breath, stepped closer. Their worlds so different, so far apart, drew near once again. And this time, neither of them looked away. For a long suspended moment, the world around them dissolved into a hazy, distant hum. People moving, cars passing, voices blending into a soft, indistinguishable murmur. Lena stood perfectly still as Adrian walked toward her. Not fast, not slow, just steady, purposeful, almost careful, as if approaching something delicate. Her heart beat too loudly, too quickly, pulsing in her ears in a way she couldn't control. Why was he here again? What did he want? What was she supposed to say? Why did she suddenly forget how to breathe? But when he reached her, when he stopped just a step away from her. All those tangled questions seemed to melt into the warm, quiet space between them. "Good morning, Lena," he said softly, almost gently, as if her name belonged to a private place only he could touch. She swallowed lightly, nodding. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. She glanced toward the clinic entrance, where her patient had just shuffled inside, then back at him, surprised to see him standing so close, surprised by the softness in his expression, surprised that he looked almost, and sure, a billionaire, and sure, about her. "I wasn't expecting to see you," Lena added, her gaze lowering for a moment, then lifting again. "I know," Adrian murmured. "I wasn't expecting to be here either, but somehow, I found myself walking in this direction, without thinking." Lena's breath caught slightly, not from fear, but from something warmer, something that unsettled her in new ways. "Is everything all right with your father?" she asked, her concern genuine. A small, grateful smile touched Adrian's lips. "He's better, much better. He asked about you." She blinked in surprise. "About me?" Adrian nodded. "He remembers everything, every detail. He's incredibly grateful. And he hopes to meet you again, properly this time." Lena looked down, her fingers curling nervously around the strap of her bag. She wasn't used to this, to attention, to gratitude, to being seen by people who lived in worlds so far from hers. "That's kind of him," she said softly, "but I was just doing what anyone should do." "No," Adrian said immediately, and there was something in his tone that made her lift her eyes. "No, Lena, what you did, most people wouldn't have. Most people didn't. You stepped in when no one else did. You saved his life. You were calm, precise, brave." She felt heat bloom in her cheeks, a soft, embarrassing warmth. He took a slow breath, as if steadying himself. "I wanted to see you again to thank you, but also because—" He stopped, choosing his next words with visible care. "Because you've been on my mind since yesterday." Lena's heart jolted, undeniably, unmistakably. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. She hadn't expected his voice to tremble almost imperceptibly. She hadn't expected her chest to tighten with such impossible emotion. "Adrian," she whispered, not knowing what she wanted to say next. He seemed to sense her hesitation, and he softened, stepping just slightly back, giving her space without losing connection. "I'm not here to overwhelm you, or complicate your day," he said quietly. "I know your life is full. I know you work long hours. I respect that, deeply." She lifted her gaze to him again, surprised by the sincerity in his eyes, the lack of arrogance, the lack of expectations. He continued, "But if you would allow it, I'd like to talk to you. Maybe over coffee, or just for a few minutes. Nothing formal, nothing heavy, just two people having a simple conversation." Lena inhaled slowly, her pulse steadying, her mind racing. He stood before her not as a CEO, not as a man with influence or wealth, but simply as a son, a man who had been afraid, a man who had felt gratitude, a man who seemed genuinely drawn to her. She didn't know what she should do. She didn't know what she could do, but honesty rose quietly inside her. "I don't know if I have much time before my shift," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "I know. I only need a moment," he said gently. "Just a walk, even for a block, if you're willing." Her chest tightened again, a subtle ache of fear and curiosity twisting together. She looked at him for a long heartbeat, and then, almost without understanding why, she nodded. "All right, a moment," she whispered. A slow, warm smile touched his lips, small, sincere, almost disarming. "Thank you," he murmured, and he offered his hand slightly, not expecting her to take it, not asking, just letting her decide. She didn't take it, but she smiled faintly at the gesture, and began walking beside him. They walked down the street, side by side, the sunlight soft on their faces, the morning breeze brushing past gently. For a few seconds neither spoke, but the silence was not awkward. It was peaceful, tentative, like a fragile bridge being built between them step by step. Finally Adrian exhaled a quiet breath. "I don't usually do this," he said. "Do what?" Lena asked. He chuckled softly. "Walk with strangers I met once. Rearrange my entire morning schedule. Lose sleep thinking about someone I barely know." Lena's cheeks flushed again. She looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You didn't lose sleep," she murmured gently. He tilted his head, giving her a raised brow. "I did," he admitted. "I kept replaying yesterday in my mind. And every time I did, I kept seeing you." Her steps faltered just slightly, her breath catching again. She quickened her pace to hide it, But he noticed. He didn't comment. He simply matched her pace, careful not to push, careful not to crowd her. She spoke first this time. "You don't have to be grateful forever, you know," she said softly. "Your father is all right. That's what matters." Adrian's voice lowered. "It's not just gratitude, Lena." She froze inside, but kept walking. Though her fingers trembled slightly, he continued, gently, "Yesterday, you changed something in me. I don't even know how to explain it, but I haven't felt like this in a long time. Maybe ever." Lena shook her head softly. "Adrian, you barely know me." He nodded. "That's true, but I want to." She inhaled, the air suddenly feeling too warm, too full. "You don't even know if I'm someone worth knowing," she whispered quietly. Adrian stopped walking. Just for a moment, enough for her to pause and face him. His expression softened, his voice a hushed certainty. "I know exactly enough. I know you're kind, brave, steady under pressure, compassionate, real." He held her gaze. "And that alone makes you someone worth knowing." Lena's throat tightened, her eyes stinging slightly for reasons she couldn't explain, emotions she didn't have names for. She looked away quickly, trying to steady herself. "I'm just me," she murmured. "And that's what I like most," he replied softly. Her chest ached, unbearably, beautifully, frighteningly. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to breathe for a moment. A nurse stepping out of the clinic called her name. "Lena, we're starting early today. Can you come in a bit sooner?" She nodded, grateful for the interruption, even if her heart rebelled. She turned back to Adrian. "I have to go," she whispered. "My shift." He nodded, but there was something in his eyes that looked like he hated watching her leave. "Of course," he said gently. "Thank you for this moment." She hesitated, then offered him a faint smile. "Thank you for walking with me," she whispered. She turned, heading toward the clinic, but halfway to the door, she felt him watching her. And against her better judgment, against her fear, she turned her head slightly. He stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression that held warmth, hope, something new blooming behind his guarded eyes. When their eyes met again, he gave her the smallest nod, almost a promise. She entered the clinic, her heart beating in a rhythm that didn't belong to her life before yesterday. A rhythm she didn't yet understand, a rhythm that terrified her and thrilled her. Adrian lingered on the sidewalk long after she disappeared inside. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, feeling something inside him shift in a way that felt irreversible. It wasn't gratitude anymore. It wasn't obligation. It was something far more dangerous, something far more beautiful, something he wasn't sure he could stop even if he tried. And he knew, as he turned and walked back down the street, that he would see her again, not because he owed her, not because he should, but because something deep inside him needed to, because her presence woke something in him he had long thought dead, because fate had placed her in his path, and he was no longer willing to walk away. The following days moved in a strange rhythm for Adrian. Meetings, calls, decisions that could alter entire companies, numbers, contracts, all of it blurred into a distant haze whenever Lena's image floated into his mind. He found himself recalling the tilt of her head as she spoke to him, the subtle tremor of her hands, the way her eyes widened just enough to show the tiniest flicker of emotion. It unsettled him, and yet it exhilarated him, a feeling so unfamiliar he didn't know what to do with it. He caught himself staring at his phone, replaying the photo from the parking lot, the still from the security camera, imagining her walking through the city streets, breathing, alive, moving. Every time he looked up from the screen, he caught himself staring out the window of his office, the city sprawling below, thinking of the quiet corners she might occupy, unaware of how much he had already occupied his thoughts. Meanwhile, Lena's days continued with the steady weight of life. The clinic was busier than ever. The phones never stopped ringing. Patients shuffled in and out. The staff worked tirelessly. She moved through it all like a shadow with a heart, present, attentive, giving of herself without expecting anything in return, as always. But even amidst the familiar routine, she felt something shift, a subtle tension she couldn't quite name. Whenever she thought of Adrian, the memory of their brief walk, the sound of his voice, the warmth in his eyes, her chest would tighten, not a painful tension, but a curious, soft ache, like a door slowly creaking open after years of being locked. She tried to push it aside, focusing on the patients in front of her, the elderly man with arthritis needing help tying his shoes, the young mother juggling 2 children and a prescription she couldn't afford. Every time she tended to someone, she reminded herself that this was the world she could manage, a world she understood, A world where control was earned through effort, not luck. And yet, she couldn't shake the thought of him. Why had he come for her? Why had he walked beside her, spoken to her with such vulnerability? What was it about her that pulled him out of his world? A world so impossibly different from hers. She pressed a hand to her forehead as she walked down the clinic hallway, a fleeting shiver running through her spine. She knew something had begun, something she wasn't prepared for. Adrian, on the other side of the city, found no solace in his work. Boardroom meetings seemed trivial, figures and graphs meaningless. His mind kept drifting back to Lena's smile, the faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips, the gentleness that lingered even after she turned away. He tried to focus, to channel the restlessness into his business, but every task seemed hollow, every decision temporary. By late afternoon, he realized he could no longer remain in his office. The walls, the polished glass, the art, everything seemed like a cage. He needed air. He needed motion. He needed to see her again. Without thinking of the consequences, he left, took the car himself, bypassed the usual entourages and bodyguards, drove to the clinic district, each turn and street a path traced by instinct, by hope, by something he didn't yet fully understand. He arrived just as Lena was stepping outside to take a quick break, a rare moment of calm. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows, painting the city in hues of warmth that seemed to match the quiet thrill in his chest. He stopped at the corner, watching her, letting her finish her stretch, her small ritual of releasing tension from shoulders stiff with work. The subtle grace of her movement, the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. It was disarming. She glanced toward him, catching his gaze across the street. For a second, she froze, heart racing, pulse leaping in her chest, the same strange ache she had felt since their brief walk earlier. He smiled softly, not a full smile, not a grand display, just a gentle, honest acknowledgement. And something inside her shifted, something fragile, something she hadn't known could awaken. They walked toward each other slowly, their steps hesitant, almost ceremonial. No words were exchanged at first, just the rhythm of approaching footsteps, each carrying the weight of anticipation. When they finally met halfway, Lena's eyes searched his face, hesitant, wary, curious. "Adrian," she said softly, voice carrying just enough uncertainty to betray her control. He nodded, studying her, his gaze steady, deliberate. "I wanted to see you," he said quietly, "to make sure, to know." He paused, swallowing against the lump rising in his throat. "That you're all right." Lena's lips parted slightly, the warmth in his words catching her off guard. I'm fine," she murmured, trying to keep her composure. "I'm all right." A silence settled, thick, almost tangible, a shared breath suspended between them. Adrian exhaled slowly, breaking the tension. "I keep thinking about yesterday," he said, "about how calmly, how bravely you acted." Lena shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It was nothing extraordinary," she said softly. "I just did what I had to." "No," Adrian interrupted gently. "It was extraordinary. And it mattered, more than you'll ever know." She felt heat rise in her chest, a mixture of embarrassment and something heavier, something thrilling. "I'm not sure how to respond to that," she whispered, her eyes flicking down to the sidewalk. "I'm not used to being seen like that." He stepped slightly closer, careful, not crowding, his presence a quiet anchor. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, "just let it be known that you matter, that you're noticed." She looked up, meeting his gaze again, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Only the soft hum of the city around them, the distant sounds of traffic, the occasional murmur of a passerby, and something unspoken passed between them, something fragile, new, undeniable, a tether being formed, a beginning neither fully understood. Lena swallowed, trying to ground herself. "I should get back," she said finally. "Patience, work." Adrian nodded, understanding, yet unwilling to let the moment end. "Of course," he said quietly, "but I'll come back when you have time, and we'll talk properly." She hesitated, then nodded slightly, a small, reluctant smile appearing. "All right," she whispered, "I'll see you." And as she turned toward the clinic, Adrian watched her go, feeling the gravity of something new, something dangerous, something he wanted more than he had dared to admit in years, something that would not be ignored, not by him, not by her, not by fate. The day that followed felt impossibly long for Lena. The clinic was louder than usual, phones ringing incessantly, the squeak of worn shoes on linoleum, the soft cries of children, the quiet murmur of elderly patients trying to explain aches that had accumulated over decades. She moved through it all with practiced efficiency, checking charts, adjusting for lines, listening, soothing, organizing, fixing problems that appeared faster than they could be solved. And yet, beneath the steady rhythm of her day, there was a subtle unease, a pull at the edges of her thoughts, a persistent echo that refused to leave. Adrian. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to give weight to the thought, but his face, his voice, his presence lingered in her mind. The curve of his smile, the intensity in his eyes, the way he had watched her, not with judgment or curiosity, but with something almost reverent. She pressed her palm to her forehead, exhaling quietly, trying to refocus on the patient in front of her. An elderly man with brittle bones and trembling hands. "Mr. Calloway," she said softly, "let's make sure we get these exercises right." Gently, step by step. He nodded, his trust in her palpable. And for a few minutes, she was able to push away the thoughts of Adrian, immerse herself in the world she knew, the world she could control, the world that demanded her presence fully. But even as she worked, the city outside moved in ways that felt orchestrated, patterns she could feel without seeing, footsteps echoing in the hall, distant honks, voices blending, a rhythm that reminded her of yesterday, of him. Meanwhile, Adrian wandered the streets near the clinic, aimless, purposeful, the kind of wandering that only someone lost in thought could undertake. He passed small cafes, the smell of freshly baked bread mingling with the crisp air, flower stands with roses and daisies spilling onto the pavement, the faint murmur of street musicians tuning instruments. And yet, he didn't notice any of it. His mind replayed the walk, the brief conversation, her smile, the warmth she carried so naturally. He stopped at a corner cafe, hesitated, thought better of entering, turned back, walked another block, his steps uncertain, pulled forward by a gravity he didn't fully understand. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't fascination. It was something quieter, more profound. A tether had formed, invisible, unspoken, and every instinct he had screamed that he could not let it slip. Back at the clinic, Lena's lunch break was brief. She ate a hastily made sandwich, her mind drifting again. She thought of her father, long gone, of her mother struggling miles away, of the life she had built herself, modest, hard-earned, real, and still. The memory of Adrian lingered, a subtle ache, a question without an answer, a force she couldn't name. Her thoughts were interrupted by Maria, who leaned against the counter with a knowing look. "You're distracted," Maria said softly. "I see it in your eyes." Lena shook her head quickly, hiding a blush that she hadn't expected. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just tired." Maria's eyes softened. She didn't push. She knew better than anyone that Lena carried the weight of her world quietly, and sometimes distraction was not laziness. It was life pressing in from all sides. Afternoon passed, the rhythm of the clinic relentless. Lena moving with steady grace, her mind split between tasks and the ever-present thought of him. Then, just as she finished checking the last patient chart, a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up, and there he was, Adrian, standing just outside the office area, casual, unassuming, but impossible to miss. Her heart jolted, a warmth blooming in her chest, a sudden, rapid awareness that her world had shifted. He offered no grand entrance, no dramatic gesture, just a small nod, a soft acknowledgement. "Lena," he said quietly, "may I come in for a moment?" She hesitated, glancing around, the bustling clinic, the patients, the staff, then back at him, something in his presence commanding quiet respect. "Yes," she said softly, "you may." He stepped in, careful not to disturb the flow of work, careful not to crowd, careful not to make her feel anything she wasn't ready to feel. They walked slowly toward the back office, past filing cabinets and medical equipment, past the steady hum of fluorescent lights. Once inside, Adrian leaned slightly against the doorframe, his gaze steady on her, intense but gentle. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly. "I just needed to see you, to talk, if that's all right." Lena nodded, unsure how to respond, unsure why her pulse raced, unsure why she couldn't stop looking at him. "I wanted to thank you again," he continued, "for everything, for your courage, your calm, your presence." She shook her head slightly. "I just did what anyone should." "No," he said gently, "what you did, it mattered, more than you can know, and more than anyone else could." Her hands twisted nervously, the weight of the words settling over her like sunlight through a window. Warm, impossible, grounding, terrifying. "I she began. I don't even know what to say. He stepped a fraction closer, careful, deliberate. You don't have to say anything. Just know that your actions, your heart, your strength, they don't go unnoticed. Lena felt heat rise, her breath catching, a fluttering in her chest that was both exhilarating and frightening. A long pause, the hum of the clinic outside, the distant voices, the faint smell of antiseptic and paper files, and in that pause, something passed between them, a quiet understanding, a fragile connection, a tether forming that neither could name. I should go, she whispered finally. Patience, I understand, he said softly, but I hope we can talk again, sometime, away from all of this. She nodded, a small, reluctant smile. I think I'd like that. He returned her smile, soft, tentative, full of unspoken promise. As Lena left the office, Adrian watched her go, and in that watching, a quiet certainty settled in him, that whatever this was, whatever it might become, it was real, undeniable, and he would not let it go. The evening descended on the city with a quiet hush, the sun dipping low behind distant buildings, casting elongated shadows across empty streets. Lena had just finished her final patient, a young boy recovering from a minor surgery, his mother clutching her hand, eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for everything, the mother whispered softly. Lena smiled gently, the exhaustion in her body heavy but manageable, her heart still restless. She stepped outside into the cool air, inhaling deeply, letting the gentle breeze brush past her face. For a moment, she allowed herself to think of nothing, only the sensation of air filling her lungs, the sounds of the city, the quiet promise of night approaching. Then, as if summoned by fate, she saw him, Adrian, standing across the street, hands in his pockets, the light from a nearby street lamp catching the sharp lines of his face. His eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He smiled faintly as she crossed toward him, hesitant and sure, aware of the strange pull she felt whenever she was near him. Lena, he said softly. May I walk with you? Her breath caught. Yes, she whispered. And together they moved down the quiet street, their steps falling into a tentative rhythm. For several blocks, neither spoke, the night settling around them like a soft blanket, the distant hum of the city fading into a gentle backdrop. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. I keep thinking about you, he said quietly, about how steady, how brave, how present you were when my father needed help. Lena glanced at him briefly. I was just doing what felt right, he shook his head slowly. No, what you did, it mattered. It still matters, and I can't stop thinking about it, about you. Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear and curiosity mingling in her veins. You barely know me, she murmured. And yet, he echoed softly. I feel like I do. Her footsteps faltered. That's impossible, she whispered. I don't know if I can. He stopped walking, looking at her. You can't control how you feel, neither can I. His voice was gentle, almost vulnerable, but we can choose how we act, what we do next. She looked away, heart pounding. And what if I'm not ready? What if I can't handle it? He stepped closer, careful. Then we take it slowly, step by step, no rush, no pressure, only honesty, only respect. A quiet tension stretched between them, the night alive with unspoken possibilities. Lena inhaled deeply. I want to try, she whispered. Finally, even if it's scary. Adrian's expression softened, a small, relieved smile touching his lips. That's all I ask. They continued walking, side by side, sharing small details of their lives. Simple things, favorite foods, childhood memories, fleeting joys. The conversation was tentative, each word measured, but beneath it, something stronger began to form. Trust, curiosity, something neither of them had anticipated but both welcomed. The next day, Adrian returned to the hospital to see his father. Harold Hill was recovering, steadily, but his expression grew serious when Adrian entered the room. You've met her, he said softly. Lena. Adrian nodded. Yes, and she is remarkable. Far beyond what I expected. Harold's eyes gleamed with quiet understanding. I hoped she would be someone who could remind both of us, of what matters, Not wealth, not success, but heart. Adrian's gaze softened. She already has. In ways I never thought possible. Meanwhile, Lena faced unexpected challenges at the clinic. An emergency patient arrived late in the evening, a young woman, with a severe allergic reaction. Chaos erupted, staff scrambling, phones ringing, monitors beeping. Lena's heart raced. She moved with precision and calm, giving orders, adjusting medication, soothing fear, and amidst the chaos, she thought briefly of Adrian. The calm reassurance he carried, the way he had spoken to her, the way he had made her feel seen. It steadied her, gave her strength, reminded her that even in chaos, connection existed. Even in fear, courage could bloom. By the time the emergency subsided, Lena was drained, but alive with a quiet sense of triumph. She stepped outside for a moment, letting the night air wash over her, breathing slowly, trying to regain her balance. Then she saw him, Adrian, waiting near the entrance. Concern etched on his face. "You're still here," he murmured. "I didn't expect to see you after such a long shift." She shook her head, faintly smiling. "I couldn't leave. Not until everyone was stable." He nodded, understanding. "You never change," he whispered softly. "Always giving, always present." She exhaled slowly. "I don't feel like I'm giving. I feel like I'm alive. When I can help." He studied her. "And that's why I'm drawn to you. Because you live fully, because you care, because you're real." Her chest tightened. "I'm just me." "No," he said gently. "Just you is enough, more than enough." A long silence settled between them, filled with unspoken thoughts, possibilities, and quiet hope. And for the first time, Lena realized the pull she felt, the inexplicable tension, the heartbeat that raced when he was near. It wasn't fear, it was something entirely different. Something that had no name yet, but that promised change. Transformation, something profound. She looked up at him. "I want to see where this goes," she whispered. "If you're willing." Adrian smiled softly. "I've been waiting to hear that." And together, under the soft glow of the streetlights, the city around them fading into a quiet hush, they began to walk, not as stranger and observer, not as billionaire and nurse, but as two souls tentatively reaching toward something new. Something real, something neither could ignore. The following morning arrived heavy and golden, sunlight spilling through the tall windows of the clinic, catching dust motes in delicate streams. Lena entered early, as always, her steps echoing softly on the polished floors, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights greeting her, the faint scent of antiseptic and coffee mixing in the air. She carried her bag over one shoulder, her thoughts drifting inevitably to Adrian, the night before replaying in fragments, the way he had smiled, the way his gaze had lingered, the subtle intensity that made her heart ache in ways she hadn't expected. She shook her head, exhaling quietly. "I can't let this take over my mind," she whispered to herself. "I have work, patience, responsibilities." But even as she moved from room to room, checking vitals, adjusting medications, consoling patients, and calming worried family members, Adrian's presence lingered like a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. Meanwhile, Adrian stood in the quiet of his office, the city stretching endlessly below, the soft hum of traffic distant and unimportant. He had been awake since before sunrise, thinking, replaying every detail of the night before. The walk, her words, her laugh, the way her eyes softened when she smiled. He had tried to focus on reports, on meetings, on phone calls, but each document blurred into insignificance, every number meaningless. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the pull she exerted on him, something quiet, subtle, but undeniable. He pressed his forehead against the window, exhaling slowly. "What is this feeling?" he murmured. "Why can't I stop thinking of her?" And deep down, he knew the answer. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't fleeting curiosity. It was something far more profound, something that frightened him because it was real, because it demanded action, because it refused to be ignored. Later that morning, fate seemed determined to intervene. Lena was assisting a patient in the rehabilitation room, carefully guiding a man with trembling legs through slow exercises, explaining each step, her voice calm, reassuring, her touch steady and practiced. She felt a sudden vibration in her pocket, pulling her out of the moment. She glanced at her phone and froze. A message from Adrian, brief, simple, yet enough to send a ripple of warmth through her chest. Can we meet after your shift? I need to see you. Just a few minutes. I promise. Nothing overwhelming. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed a quick reply. Yes, I'll be here. She exhaled, pressing her forehead against her hand. He shouldn't have to see this side of me. Exhausted. Messy. Tired. She whispered. But I can't not meet him. Her heart beat rapidly. Anticipation, fear, excitement. Emotions she hadn't dared to name. Adrian, meanwhile, waited just outside the clinic, pacing slightly, hands in pockets, scanning the street, catching every movement, noticing every detail. When Lena finally emerged, scrub-clad, hair tied back, weary yet radiant in the simplicity of her presence, he felt something inside him shift, a quiet, terrifying surge of longing. Lena, he said softly, his voice steady but low. Thank you for coming. She offered a faint, tired smile. I wouldn't miss it. They began walking, slowly, deliberately, the city around them fading into background noise, the soft hum of traffic and distant voices forming a muted symphony to accompany their steps. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, Adrian admitted. I've been thinking about you constantly. Since yesterday. She glanced at him briefly. I've been thinking about you too, she whispered, even though I know I shouldn't. A silence stretched between them, heavy, laden with unspoken emotions, the kind of silence that both terrified and thrilled. I want to know more about you, he said finally. Not the public figure, not the CEO. The real you. The Lena I saw yesterday. The Lena who saved my father. She shook her head softly. I'm not sure I can reveal everything. My life, it's messy. Complicated. He stepped closer. Careful. I don't need perfection. I don't need your whole life at once. I just want to be here. To understand. To share in what you can offer. Her chest tightened. I've never had anyone ask to just understand me, she murmured. Usually people want what I can give, not who I am. Adrian's gaze softened. Then I'll wait. I'll be patient. I'll prove that I care for you, not what you do or who you serve. Her eyes glistened with inched tears. That's new to me, she whispered. To be seen like that. They walked on, side by side, words flowing now in quiet exchanges, anecdotes, fears, hopes, mundane details. Yet beneath it, the tension of something deeper, something neither had yet fully named. Suddenly, a car honked sharply nearby, startling them both, a reminder that the world still existed outside their fragile bubble. Lena looked down, heart pounding. I shouldn't let this go too far. Adrian reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Lena, I don't want to rush you, but I can't ignore this feeling, this connection. Her breath caught, the warmth of his hand lingering. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted, but I want to be. I want to try. His hand lingered slightly longer. That's all I need, to know that you want to try too. The night wrapped around them, the city quiet now, their hearts speaking in the unspoken rhythm of footsteps and breaths. They paused on the corner, faces illuminated by the soft glow of a street lamp, the distance between them minimal, heavy with possibility. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, Lena whispered. I only know that I don't want to walk away. Adrian's eyes softened. Then we face it together, step by step, no matter what comes. And in that moment, the first real test of courage, trust, and hope had begun, because they both knew love, connection, and fate itself were not without trials, and the world would soon demand that they prove the strength of what was quietly growing between them. The clinic's waiting room was alive with quiet tension, the kind that lived in places built from necessity rather than luxury. A chipped coffee machine rattled in the corner. Papers cluttered the reception desk. Old plastic chairs groaned under the weight of people who carried stories heavier than their bodies could bear. Children coughed softly. A mother tried to soothe her crying toddler. A teenager pressed ice to his swollen ankle. This was the world Lena belonged to, the world she chose, the world she protected with all she had. And just outside its doors, standing tall yet hesitant, was Adrian Hale. He wasn't used to looking out of place. Not in boardrooms, not at galas, not in the exclusive circles that defined his life. But here, amid the chipped paint and worn floors, he felt unprepared. He hesitated before entering, resting his hand on the metal door handle as if gathering courage. This moment felt heavier than any business decision, heavier than any risk he had ever taken. Because this wasn't about strategy. It wasn't about power or influence. It was about gratitude, humanity, connection, and something else. Something unspoken. something quietly blooming in the corner of his heart. Finally, he pulled the door open and stepped inside. The room shifted the moment he entered. People looked up, not because they recognized him. No one here belonged to the world of millionaires and headlines, but because his presence was striking, controlled, silently intense. He offered a polite nod to the receptionist, who blinked in surprise but quickly regained her composure. "Good morning," the receptionist said. "How may I help you?" Adrian exhaled slowly. He wasn't even sure what to ask. "I'm looking for someone," he said softly. "A young woman. She may work here." The receptionist tilted her head. "We have many volunteers and nurses. Do you know her name?" Adrian hesitated, feeling a wave of embarrassment tighten his chest. "No," he admitted quietly. The receptionist looked puzzled. "How does she look?" He reached into his pocket and unfolded the printed photo still. It was slightly crumpled from how many times he had held it, stared at it, sought answers in it. He placed it gently on the counter. The receptionist leaned in, adjusting her glasses, squinting at the low-resolution image. After a moment, her expression softened. "Oh, that's Lena," she said with warm familiarity. "Yes, she works here. She's on shift right now." A strange mixture of relief and nervousness washed over him, a quiet surge of something dangerously close to joy. "May I speak with her?" Adrian asked, voice steadier than he felt. The receptionist paused, glancing toward the hallway behind her. "She's with a patient right now," she said gently, "but you may wait, if you'd like." He nodded quickly. "Yes, I'll wait." She gestured to the seating area, but he remained standing, as if sitting might make the moment slip away. Minutes passed, one after another, slow, heavy, each carrying the weight of anticipation. Through the hallway door, he could occasionally hear soft voices, footsteps, a muffled laugh from Maria, the clink of medical instruments, and then the door swung open, and Lena stepped out. Her scrubs were slightly wrinkled, her hair pulled back into a neat bun with a stubborn strand slipping free. A faint shadow of exhaustion lay beneath her eyes, but her expression was warm, grounded, steady. She spoke softly to an elderly woman walking beside her. "Just make sure you take the medication after food, not before. And please come back if the swelling doesn't go down." The woman nodded gratefully and shuffled toward the exit. Lena handed her a small bag of ointments and gently touched her arm in reassurance before turning back. And then she saw him. Her steps faltered. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Her eyes widened just a little. Enough for him to notice, but not enough for anyone else. Adrian stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to even remember what he had planned to say. He expected to find relief, closure, gratitude, but seeing her like this, alive, radiant in her simplicity, dedicated, humble, unraveled him completely. "Hello," Lena said softly after a moment, her voice cautious, almost fragile. You're the son of the man from last night, aren't you?" He nodded, struggling to breathe properly. "Yes," he managed. Adrian Hale." She gave a small nod. "I'm glad your father had someone come for him." "He did," Adrian said, "but only because of you." Lena lowered her gaze slightly, embarrassed, uncomfortable with praise she never sought. "I'm just happy he's stable," she whispered. "Is he stable? Is he?" "He's awake," Adrian replied, stepping closer. "And he asked about you." That made her freeze. He did," she breathed. Adrian nodded. "He wanted your name. He wanted to thank you personally." Lena blinked, her lash trembling slightly. "That's not necessary," she murmured. "I don't need recognition. I just did what I was trained to do." "No," Adrian said softly. "You did more. You did what no one else did." A long silence stretched between them, deep, delicate, filled with 1,000 unspoken things. Behind the silence, the clinic continued moving. Phones rang, babies cried, footsteps echoed. Life continued, but within the space between them, the world felt still. Adrian took a slow breath. "I came because I wanted to thank you properly," he said, choosing each word with care. "And because my father wishes to meet you. When you're ready." Lena looked down, twisting her fingers gently. Her face carried that familiar mixture of softness and sorrow, the kind of expression born from years of giving more than receiving. "I'm glad he's all right," she whispered again. "I really am." She looked up, offering him a small, gentle smile. "But you didn't have to come all the way here. Your father is what matters. I'm just me." "You're not just you," Adrian said quietly, surprising even himself with the intensity of his tone. "You saved his life. You saved something I can never replace. And I won't forget that." Lena inhaled softly, the weight of his sincerity settling over her like warm sunlight she wasn't sure she deserved. Adrian hesitated, searching her eyes, wanting to understand her, wanting to bridge the distance between them. "May I ask your name?" he said, his voice almost a whisper. She blinked, then smiled shyly. "Lena," she said. "Just Lena." It wasn't just a name. It was a turning point, a quiet shift in fate, a door opening somewhere in the universe. "Well, Lena," Adrian murmured, "I'm grateful to meet you. More than you know." She looked at him, then really looked at him, her eyes studying the sincerity in his expression, the unguarded vulnerability he tried to hide. "Your father is lucky to have you," she said softly. "Not everyone has someone who comes for them so quickly." Her words pierced him, more than she realized, because she didn't know. She didn't know the distance between him and his father. She didn't know the apologies left unspoken, the guilt carried in silence, the years spent chasing success while sacrificing time. She didn't know how much those words meant. Before he could respond, Maria called from down the hall. "Lena, we need you in room 5. Lena turned. "I'm coming," she called back. She looked once more at Adrian, her eyes warm but hesitant. "I should get back," she whispered, "but tell your father I'm wishing him a full recovery." "I will," Adrian said, "and I'll be back, if that's all right." She hesitated, then nodded gently. "Yes, that's all right." With that, she slipped through the hallway door and disappeared into the rhythm of her work, leaving Adrian standing in the middle of a crowded clinic, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: hope, and something even deeper, something both terrifying and indescribably beautiful. He knew then, he wasn't done searching for her. He had only just begun. The following days brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. Lena arrived at the clinic early. As always, exhaustion clinging to her muscles, but her mind alive with the quiet anticipation of seeing Adrian again. The morning shift was chaotic, more patients than usual, an emergency arriving before breakfast, the phone ringing incessantly, staff moving in a blur of urgency. Amidst it all, Lena's thoughts kept drifting to Adrian, to the warmth in his eyes, to the careful patience he had offered, the gentle way he had respected her boundaries. Her chest ached with the pull of emotions she didn't yet have names for. A mix of hope, fear, curiosity, longing. She pushed it aside as she guided a patient through physical therapy exercises, her hand steady, voice calm, though her heart raced in secret. Adrian, meanwhile, faced his own battles. The boardroom, normally a place of clarity and control, now felt suffocating, numbers blurred, deals meaningless, thoughts consumed by Lena. He found himself leaving the office abruptly, the city streets alive with morning energy, but all of it insignificant, all of it muted by the pull he felt toward her. He arrived at the clinic just as a brief lull allowed him to see her in the hallway, scrub-clad, hair tied back, moving with efficiency and grace, oblivious to his gaze, and yet completely inhabiting his thoughts. "Lena," he called softly. She looked up, startled, her chest tightening. "Can we talk?" She nodded. Uncertain, yes. They walked outside, the city alive but softened by distance, the hum of traffic a gentle accompaniment, the air crisp with the promise of approaching evening. "I wanted to ask you," Adrian began, "about yesterday, and everything you do." Lena hesitated. "What about it?" He stopped walking. "How you manage so much, how you care so deeply, how you stay so strong." Her lips pressed together. "I do what I must. It's not always strength, sometimes it's just survival." He studied her. "And yet it's inspiring." "You inspire me." A silence fell, filled with unspoken thoughts, feelings they had yet to articulate. Then, as if the world refused to leave them undisturbed, a commotion arose near the clinic entrance. A man arguing with staff, shouting angrily, demanding special attention, disrupting the calm. Lena's instincts kicked in immediately. She approached the man with calm authority, her voice soft but firm. "Sir, please. We are helping everyone as fast as we can." He ignored her, anger flaring, escalating, pushing boundaries, threatening. Adrian, witnessing the confrontation, stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice low and firm. "Sir, that is enough. Step back." The man turned to him, surprised, taken aback by the quiet force in Adrian's tone. "Who are you to tell me what to do?" "I am someone who refuses to let you harm anyone here," Adrian replied, steady and controlled. "Now step aside." The man hesitated, then left, muttering under his breath, and silence fell once again. Lena exhaled slowly, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know he'd escalate like that." Adrian stepped closer. "You handled yourself beautifully. Calm, patient, strong. But you don't have to face things alone." Her eyes met his, a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper. "I know, but it's hard to accept help." He reached for her hand, careful. "You don't have to be strong alone. Not with me." Her chest tightened. "I'm trying." And in that moment, a quiet understanding settled between them, the first real test of trust and connection. They walked down the street together, hand in hand, slowly, words unnecessary, the bond between them growing stronger, fragile, yet undeniable. Later, as night fell, Adrian took her to a small cafe, intimate, quiet, warm light spilling across worn wooden tables, the aroma of coffee and pastries mixing with the soft chatter of late diners. They sat across from each other, neither rushing, letting the world fade, letting conversation flow naturally. "I feel like I can breathe when I'm with you," Adrian admitted quietly. "Like the rest of the world fades." Lena smiled faintly. "I feel the same, but it scares me." He reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Fear is part of it. It means it's real. It means it matters." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "I've never felt seen like this before, and you deserve to be seen, fully, without judgment, without expectation." He said softly, "You deserve honesty, respect, care." Her hand covered his. "Then I trust you," she whispered. "I trust you with this, with me." A quiet peace settled, fragile, tentative, but powerful. Two hearts meeting across divides, worlds apart, yet bridging the gap through trust, vulnerability, and honesty. And in that moment, both understood a vital truth, that love, connection, and courage were not about perfection, not about wealth, status, or influence. They were about seeing and honoring the real person before you, about taking risks, trusting hearts, and stepping forward even when fear lingered at the edge. As they left the cafe, the night wrapping around them, the city quiet and warm, they walked hand in hand, aware of challenges ahead, aware of the trials life would present, but also aware of the strength they had found, quietly, in each other, and in that strength, a promise, not of perfection, but of resilience, courage, and the unwavering potential for love.